Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I am the lead learner at the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning, and it is a pleasure to be here with you tonight. There's so much going on in the world of education right now. So much going on. We just had a recent election, and I want to take the time to personally thank Lisa Ellis and everyone on her campaign team for running an amazing campaign. She got, over 700,000 votes, and just ran a really great campaign. And really appreciate her, think about the fact that she was teaching full time and running for state office like that. The amount of energy and effort that was put into that was something that's really inspiring. And I just want to say thank you to her. I know many of us are disappointed in the results, but now is not the time to give up. Certainly we can take a moment to be discouraged, to be frustrated, but it is incumbent upon us to now decide what we're going to do with the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I know a lot of us are concerned about the situation down in Berkeley. We're concerned about the supply and demand report that was just released today. If you haven't had a chance to see that, the SCEA has posted something on its Facebook page as a response to that. We are seeing a record number of vacant classrooms, a record number of teacher departures over the past year, according to a report put out by the Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement. And speaking of that, we are going to dive deep into that report on Monday with Dr. Jennifer Garrett. So put this little promo up there on the Monday from 7 to 8. The author of that report is Dr. Jennifer Garrett, a colleague of mine when I used to work at SCEA. And she and I are going to have a deep conversation about that report and what it means. Very alarming numbers, and very concerning to think that we're at record highs and smashing the records for the number of vacant classrooms, which is problematic mainly for our students, because our students need the best possible people to lead them, lead their instruction, lead their development. So lots going on. It is important and incumbent upon us to come together and to commit to action. We also have people banning books and just a whole host of things that are coming our way. We are going to need to band together, to work collectively together, to make our voices stronger, because when we come together, we can collectively build strength and build power and push back against these things. We encourage you to join our union at the SCEA. You can look at the bottom of the screen. It's jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744. If you are not ready to do that, but you'd just like to learn more about us, you can go to the scea.org/connect, fill out that form, and we will connect with you. So no commitment there, just some information there that helps guide our work. Without further ado, I would like to bring in tonight's guest. Over the summer, we held a retreat in Old Fort, North Carolina. And one of the participants was a gentleman named E.J. Anderson, who is the executive director of OnTrack in Greenville. He is busy tonight doing an event for the Bold Ally Network. And so we are going to bring in the assistant director, and that is Taylor Dockter. Taylor, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing so well. Thankful for this opportunity to be joining you and everyone on live, and just excited to share more about our work.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you. When I was invited by EJ to come up there, and we were able to all have lunch together and have some really great conversations around the work that you do. It's very inspiring, and I'm very, very excited to share with our folks tonight what OnTrack is doing. Before we jump into exactly what OnTrack is and what you guys do, just let's talk a little bit about your background. Like, how did you come into this work, and what's your background experience?
Well, I'm actually right now up in Asheville, North Carolina, spending time with other community schools across the country. And it's been interesting to hear how many of the people who are in this space come from more of an education focus. I actually came to this work through public health. So my background actually started in teen pregnancy prevention, really wanting to understand the emotion side of it. What was leading to decision making? How were adults speaking with youth and empowering them to make healthy and wise decisions? From there, I moved into the drug and alcohol prevention space. So I really have a heart for adolescents and some of the challenging decisions that they're making and navigating systems. But so often I felt like it was too little too late. I was really eager to start getting upstream and understand the systems that could be supporting our youth and families earlier. And so when I looked around the community, I was pleasantly surprised to find the work of OnTrack Greenville, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. So I've been with the team a little over 2 years now and truly enjoying the work that we're doing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that work. So exactly, if for those people who are watching, this is not a track and field kind of thing. We're not, racing or anything. So for those who are wondering what OnTrack does, can you kind of just summarize the work that you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So OnTrack Greenville is an initiative situated within United Way of Greenville County. They are our partners, our supporters, they are our backbone that make this work possible. And the work began almost 8 years ago now with a conversation between United Way of Greenville County and the Greenville County School District looking at a geographic area of Greenville County. So if you're not familiar with Greenville County here in South Carolina, on the west part of the county, we have what we call the White Horse Crescent. It's about a 20-mile long stretch of a two-lane, sometimes four-lane highway where there were a lot of textile mills at one point. And as industry changes over time, so do job opportunities. And so as our textile mills moved out, fewer job opportunities moved into the community. And so it's a community that now has fewer job opportunities. There's not a lot of public transportation, food deserts. So there's a lot of system level challenges. We're seeing that family level stressors play out in our schools where our students were not thriving the way that we knew that they could. So we started to look around to figure out what ways can the community and the school district partner together along this geographic area to figure out what are the resources needed for students to thrive. And so today, where we sit as an intermediary between our community and our schools to figure out the best partners and programs that we can bring in to our schools to help not only our students, but also our families and the adults in the building thrive.
Yeah. That's awesome work. And so how do you like what are some specific things that you do? I know when I talk with EJ, we talked about trying to support the educators in those schools. What are some other things? What are all the ways that you kind of sort of match up resources with those communities and schools?
It all starts with our data. So we leverage a system called an early warning system. We brand it as an early warning response system, but many communities now have it. 8 years ago, some of that work was just starting, but now we're so thankful to see other communities are really embracing this. There's a lot of conversation going on. And by looking at our attendance, behavior, and course performance, we call it our A, Bs, and Cs, it gives us a snapshot of where our students are. And so we can classify them as green, so we're seeing all signs that they are on track. Yellow means we're starting to see slipping in one of these key areas, and red means that they're off track. So we know that once a student starts flagging red, their likelihood of graduating on time starts to diminish. And so having that data is not enough if you don't do something with it.
Right.
And especially in schools like our on-track schools, we may have large swaths of our student population that are flagging red in a similar area. So we're balancing both these tier 3 student level interventions, but also tier 2 small groups and tier 1 climate and culture. But what we're doing is supporting these on-track meetings that are happening in the buildings on a weekly or biweekly basis. These meetings are made possible through our on-track facilitators. We often say that they are the heartbeat of this work. They are full-time staff that are in the buildings, and they are positioned to create the connection between the data and the stories. Because we know that quantitative data is just part of what's going on.
Right.
But you get all of these trusted adults in a space, and we say, this student is flagging in the system. What do we know about them? So that starts to really do the digging for the root cause. And so often the root cause is linked to these larger systems. So it could be a caregiver that has some chronic health conditions. The family is experiencing housing instability. There's food insecurity. Often there's the intersection of challenges. So once we delve down, we figure out what are some of those key root causes, we can identify the partners and services that are the best match. And we're able to then track that student's progress over time and do these check-ins. And the on-track facilitator can look at the adults in the room and say, are we seeing the change that we want to see? Or do we need to bring in other services? And in so many ways, we recognize that the partners at the table can only handle so much of a caseload or so many families that they're working with.
Yeah.
So we're always looking at how we mobilize new community partners to be brought into the fold that can be trusted to really partner and come alongside of our families. And so some examples of that: summer programming. We partner with Bell Excel. So Bell Excel is a national model, and they are braiding together evidence-based academic curriculum and social emotional learning. Tons of hands-on PBIS and incentives, after-school programming, school-based health centers made possible through our partnership with Prisma Health. And then we also have communities in schools, which is a phenomenal partner doing intensive case management. And we have full-time site coordinators in all 6 of our OnTrack schools. So there's just a few of some of our key partners that are doing that work and directly working with our students and families on a daily basis.
I love that, it seems like historically in education, when a student hasn't performed well, we just kind of put all the blame on the student. We don't really dig underneath to look at what are the structures that, or what are the issues that may be that young person's dealing with that, the school hasn't really been addressing. And I love the fact that you're digging into that and really connecting that child with the resources they need, because we know, like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that if the child doesn't have their physiological needs, doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel a sense of belonging, doesn't have those basic needs met, it's very difficult to come into a school and learn algebra when you're worried about your mom's health, or you're worried about, are you going to have food to eat tonight, that kind of thing. So I think that's beautiful. One of the questions that I had as you were talking is, one of the issues that may not really be able to be addressed, or maybe you've thought about this, or like the systemic issues culturally, the systemic issues politically, economically, that impact our students. How is there a way that OnTrack tries to address that, or is that something that you just realize is not in your purview? So you do what you can with connecting the resources that you're capable of. Like how do you think about, how do you personally think, and how maybe does OnTrack, and you may want to differentiate those, but about those systemic issues that students are facing?
On a personal level, the systems work is what drives me on a daily basis. And it's been a beautiful alignment to be part of an initiative that is very systems focused. And so as a core staff situated within United Way of Greenville County, there's very little that we can do. However, when we mobilize our community and we partner with people who are already doing phenomenal systems level work, I feel very encouraged that change is possible.
Yeah.
In this past year, we put together a stakeholder committee. That was a little bit of a gap that we had prior to this. We often gathered our implementation partners whose work we were funding or already had these very established partnerships with. But we realized, to your point, if we're going to look at some of these systems, who are system decision makers? And so on our stakeholder committee, we're bringing in housing and transportation, law enforcement, DSS.
Yeah.
Even these individuals may often feel that they are not situated to make change, but oftentimes they are those key decision makers.
Mm.
And the more that we're having open and honest conversations around how decisions made in one sector are going to impact other sectors and going to then impact families, that's really where I think the change starts. So we're really thankful for that opportunity. We're going to be convening quarterly, and we're constantly looking at how do we bring in more voices. And a big focus for us going into the next quarter is how do we really mobilize our family voice and not get the same families at the table that we may see at a number of events, but create opportunities for voices that are less often heard in our community.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I had a really good conversation with a very close friend of mine a couple of nights ago, and we're actually talking about PBIS and MTSS and things like that, and we were talking about mindfulness and those things, and we had a conversation, and when you mentioned PBIS, it reminded me of that, and I just kind of want like your thoughts on this, your reaction to this. I wrote a short post on Facebook, and I said that a lot of times what we do with students is we label their behavior as bad behavior or misbehavior or whatever, um, and we assume that it's because there's some kind of character flaw with the student, when it's quite possible that they're just having a normal human response to the toxic culture in which they find themselves, and then we label that as bad behavior. And what I mean by toxic culture is, um, unfortunately, we have schools that are built around the god of standardized testing, and that apply a lot of pressure on teachers, who then apply a lot of pressure on students to master certain skills at the sacrifice of things like creativity and problem solving and going outdoors and having recess and having downtime and things like that. We're going bell to bell to bell to bell, which neuroscience doesn't support. We're putting a lot of pressure on teachers, which puts a lot of pressure on kids. And I wonder sometimes if the misbehavior is actually just a normal human response, but we're utilizing things like PBIS to incentivize students to just be obedient and compliant within a system that's actually toxic, that they should be rebelling against. I don't know how you feel about that, but that conversation made me really think about, like, what are we imposing on young people, and what are we teaching them in terms of being compliant and obedient, and is that ultimately the best thing for humanity? Thoughts on that?
I think that's a really interesting point, Todd. And it really, I think, speaks to the motivations and what is driving systems when they're put into place. So I think if a school approaches PBIS and MTSS as a method of controlling behavior and trying to fix what they're labeling as problem students, then there is a true risk of that, of creating behaviors that you want to see without a lot of insight into, is the student demonstrating this behavior for a reason?
Yeah.
And so those motivations are so important. And what I hope we will see is that any school that is looking at PBIS and MTSS is first looking at the mental and emotional health of the adults in the building.
Mm.
Is there a climate where teachers feel supported and encouraged and heard, where they have the incentives in place? Because we all benefit from incentives when they're applied correctly. So are we trying to create compliant teachers, or are we creating teachers who are enthusiastic and feel appreciated? And then we are layering on the breakfasts, or you can take a mental health day and we understand that, we respect that you're a person. If we're creating that top down, then I think when it comes to our students, we are reinforcing the right behaviors. We're reinforcing students demonstrating kindness and compassion and some of
Mm.
those key things that are actually going to carry them through life, as opposed to, did you walk silently from point A to point B? And we're going to see that as a sign of you being compliant or following the rules, as opposed to, you stopped and picked up that piece of trash in the hallway without anyone asking. I really appreciate that you take pride in our school, because that's a characteristic that the adults in the building are already demonstrating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And so I think that what you're saying is so important, that, to help students, if we really want to help students, we have to help teachers, because if teachers are quitting, or if we can't recruit good people into the profession, we're going to have a really hard time. The students are going to have a hard time. They need to have the best possible people, leading them, inspiring them. And if those people are burned out and not inspired themselves, it's very difficult to think that they're going to be able to inspire and lead students. So, I know OnTrack, I talked to EJ and you about this, about what are some of the resources that OnTrack is providing the educators who are working with these young people. What are some of the things that you're doing for them, or plan to do?
Absolutely. Working through kind of an academic calendar year, we have every summer as our launch point, our summit. And so these past 2 years, it's been a one-day summit. We're playing around with some new ideas. I'm hopeful that 2023 we can actually make it a multi-day event. But we're
Mm.
really starting with the time of bringing together all of our adults in the building, and that's really important to us, that we're not just including teaching staff. But if you're an adult in the building, you're critically important, and we appreciate you. So can we gather you together? Can we feed you? Can we swag you up? And it's not, can we buy into this work, but let's start first with showing appreciation before we're asking anything of you. And
Yeah.
so having some inspirational speakers, some learning opportunities. Then a key part of that is also introducing Greenville County School District's trauma informed specialist. So TJ Rumler has been a gift to our work. He is really, we had 20 more TJs, we could
Right.
use it, but he is able to provide some really unique opportunities for our staff throughout the year. And that's for our on-track staff, but also for adults in our school buildings. So those could be one-on-one coaching sessions. Those can be small groups, book studies. So the book What Happened to You recently did a book study with
Yeah.
40 staff members, and that was amazing to create these small group learning opportunities to take what are you learning in a book format and how does that overlay with your experience as an educator or what you're navigating day to day. So all that's coming around our staff and our teachers. We also have a great partnership with Public Education Partners, which is also based out of Greenville, South Carolina. So PEP, as we call them, really are fully educator focused. And so they are doing special events around some of these key, education week, teacher appreciation week, layering on appreciation and meals and incentives and just trying to pour in to the educators. They also are doing book studies. And then this past year, actually, we launched what we call our menu of support.
Mm.
So those are a bucket of resources that we are entrusting with our on-track facilitators at each school. So they are our challenge to think about the staff and the students and the families. But with that, we don't want our staff forgotten. It's so easy because of the heart of the adults in the building for them to just really take that selfless approach of let me funnel these resources to our students and to our families. And so we really encourage them, what does it look like to pour back into your own building as well? And so that's been really great to just give them a bucket of resources and let schools make school level decisions around what is meaningful. So that
Yeah.
might be gift cards, that could be special meals. So we're still playing around with this. It's a pilot. This is year 2, and we've had great feedback. And this is the first year we're really putting it truly to a school level. And I think that's been a game changer instead of trying to create a top down approach of really empowering schools with that and letting the facilitators guide that process as the heartbeat of the work.
Yeah, I don't think we can emphasize enough how important it is if we want to help kids that we've got to help teachers. That it can't be, it's not an either or thing. And I think historically we've approached, helping kids like we will tell teachers, all right, we're going to teach you how to do this for the kids, or we're going to give this to you so that you can give it to the kids. And so we just need to spend so much more time and energy on doing things specifically for educators, because if they're healthy and they're well, and that's really the kind of what guides our work at Cool is making sure that we're helping them from the inside out. So helping them with the health resources, the wellness resources, but also advocating for them in terms of their pay and working conditions, because we all know teachers are chronically overworked and underpaid, and that leads to burnout for sure. And you mentioned TJ Rumler. I just want to say, if he's watching, big shout out to TJ Rumler. I think his website's tjrumler.com. You should definitely check him out. He does some amazing work. I'm glad you mentioned him, and I'm so glad that he's a part of the work that you're doing. How many schools are connected with OnTrack in Greenville, approximately?
So we have, well, there's two ways to answer the question actually. So with OnTrack Greenville as an initiative, we are connected to 6 schools. So that
Okay.
is Berea Middle, Lakeview Middle, Tanglewood Middle, Greenville Early College, which is a special program, Berea High, and Carolina Academy. That being said, the partnership between United Way of Greenville County and the Greenville County School District, all around the early warning response system, that locally we brand that as the on-track process. The ability to look at your data and conduct school level meetings. The on-track process has been rolled out district wide. So nearly 100 schools are able to access these data systems and conduct their own meetings. What really differentiates our 6 schools is that we are having our full-time on-track facilitators in the building, leading the process, and then we are bringing in additional partners and supports, because we know that if we want all students to thrive, some students at some schools need more support.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you have six one facilitator per school. Is that how that works?
Yes, and then we have 2 communities and school site coordinators in each of our schools as well.
And tell me the difference between those roles. So if I'm an on-track facilitator versus the community and schools coordinator, like what am I doing? What are the differences in those roles?
Well, and that's a common question that does come up in our building of understanding that differentiation, and it's in some ways complicated by the fact that there's such great partnership,
Yeah.
that when you're at an event, you're gonna see all 3 of them pitching in, collaborating, co-creating. On-track facilitators are employees of our school district, and they are the guides for the on-track process. So the analogy of a community school, so if anyone watching is familiar with the community schools model, they really are like a community schools director, where they are looking at the vast array of resources available in the community and figuring out who needs to be connected to the building to meet needs that are currently going unmet. Communities and schools does a lot of similar great partnering and working with different community partners. They have a different focus within our schools, specifically around case management.
Hmm.
So each of them can case manage up to 50 students at a time. And what we really are encouraging is what we consider a blended caseload, because we know that 50 individuals who are in crisis, that is more than any one individual can
Yeah.
have meaningful connections with.
Sure.
And thinking about the well-being of the adult at the center of that, that is not good for anyone's well-being. So they're
Mm.
going to be intensively case managing some students that are in really difficult situations. They may be a layer of challenges, and they're going to have other students who just need a little bit of accountability, a little bit of that trusted adult touch point. And then we got some students who are doing really well that may have been with communities and schools for a number of years, and they're just doing those quick touch bases. Communities and schools also do small groups, and so do some of our on-track facilitators. And those are often around some of these core SEL components or some accountability groups for attendance, ways to create micro communities within fairly large schools.
Yeah. You mentioned communities and schools. So Jose Morales, do you know him?
Oh, Jose is absolutely wonderful.
Okay, so he's going to be coming out. I have him scheduled to come on December 15th. So for those watching who want to learn more about community and schools, Jose will be doing a session December 15th from 7 to 8 o'clock. Great, right here. So looking forward to that. You mentioned SEL, and I don't know how aware you are of this. I'm hoping I want this to go away, but unfortunately, what we're seeing is folks are conflating SEL with all kinds of stuff like Marxism or some kind of woke indoctrination or something like that. I've been saying I suppose if Mr. Rogers were still alive, they'd be calling him a Marxist woke indoctrinator. But I'm wondering, like, as you mention SEL, have you been noticing any kind of pushback in those communities or within the within the work? Has there been any of that pushback, or has it been welcomed and working well?
We've been helped by our Greenville County School District has an SEL focus, and they have been rolling out a focus starting from adults and working their way down for the last several years. Having TJ being part of the staff, Dr. Ellen Hampshire, the psych department over there. I mean, there's some really amazing allies who are advocates for that work. It also really helps us in that social emotional learning has been built into our logic model and our framework since the start. And
Mm,
really, our evaluators, so we partnered with the Riley Institute at Furman University for several years for evaluation. One of the biggest takeaways was something that when we heard it was, well, absolutely. But sometimes you need that outside eye to tell you something that's kind of right in front of you. But if we want to move the needle on attendance and behavior and course performance, those come secondary to a student wanting to be in the building and wanting to connect and feeling like they matter. And
right.
those are all elements of SEL. And so while we've been looking at SEL outcomes with our students since the inception of our work, we saw it as almost a byproduct of focusing on A, B's, and C's as opposed to being our immediate focus. We've really been trying to to realign our language and our strategies around those core components. So that's really been a focus of tier one activities around creating a sense of belonging. And what does that look like? So excited Jose is going to be on. He can really speak to some of the work that he has been doing
Mm,
around that belonging and amplifying student voice. And
yeah.
so anytime that I've encountered concerns around SEL, it's been a great opportunity to just ask curious questions around how do you define SEL? And then
Right.
to also have an opportunity to share what are some of the core components of social emotional learning that I care about, that OnTrack cares about. I I have yet to encounter a situation where when you start to break down those components and you say we want every person to feel like they belong in the building, if that's offensive or if that causes someone to bristle, then we got some other work to do. But I think
Right.
we all resonate with wanting to belong and feel like
Right.
we matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wish we would make clear what it is and what it's not. I think there's just a lot of misinformation and miscommunication about what SEL is supposed to be. Um, so what are some of the biggest successes that you've celebrated in OnTrack? Like, what are some of the things like? I know you're familiar with the data and so forth. What are some of the things that you're excited about that you can share that are successes for you guys?
Sure. Our school-based health centers have been just a wonderful partnership with Prisma Health. When we started this work, we realized that we were missing out on students because they were not coming into the academic year with the immunizations that they need. Going back to system level challenges, we don't have access to public transportation for many of our communities. A lot of our caregivers are working jobs where they have very little control over their schedule. They don't have paid leave. They may not find out their schedule until a day or two beforehand. And so if you have a student that has immunization needs and you're trying to coordinate transportation through other members of the community, not sure if you can get time off, you show up somewhere and you're missing some sort of paperwork or paperwork gets lost or there were shots done in another community. All of these layers create barriers which keep students out of seats. And missed seat time is critical. I mean, that's if we are not focusing on why students are not in seats, then we're never going to get ahead. And this is something that we can address. And so, not only that, but if a student shows up and our first response is just to send them home,
Mm,
then we're also missing out on an opportunity to figure out is there something that can be done to safely keep that student at school.
yes.
Granted, COVID has certainly complicated that, and we need to exercise precautions, and we don't want students who are actively sick staying at school, being around their peers. But sometimes the reasons our students are leaving the classroom and saying, I have a headache, they feel overwhelmed. There's mental health challenges going on.
Mhm.
There's a sense of, I don't belong here. There's bullying. There's a learning disability that's been unaddressed. And so we are able to be doing those screenings in house. And we have every year we've ranged from a 97 to a 99% return to class rate. So we're making sure that those needs are being met. They're actually able to go back to the classroom, which is also then making us wonder, well, how many students were previously leaving the building for things that were not actually physical but mental? And then we're removing them from that classroom environment. And if the family is not equipped to navigate these different systems, what then happens?
Mm,
So that's been a huge win. Another huge win is our summer program. So our Bell Excel Scholars, it's a 6-week accelerated program that's focused on math and ELA. The national model says that in 6 weeks, you're going to be able to get at least a month of learning. So we're going to not only prevent summer slide, we're going to be able to combat it. Since we've been looking at this, we've averaged 3 months of learning gain in
wow.
6 weeks. And that speaks to the incredible teachers who are willing to partner with us over the summer, which we know is a big ask, huge ask. The academic year is long, and we understand a lot of them just need to disengage and take care of themselves and their families. But those who are able to come alongside us, Bell Excel is not just academics, it also is bringing in that PBIS component, really focused on growing the whole student and creating leaders. And so we do that with our rising sixth graders. So that's been another huge win. And then with communities and schools, we've seen some of our students who are most at risk of disengaging really stabilize. And so oftentimes when you're looking at data, you want to see gains, and it
Hmm.
can be easy to forget that stabilizing can be the greatest win of all. You've got a student that is in free fall when we're looking at that absentee data and they are missing just you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 days. And then we get them matched to a site coordinator and they've got that trusted adult who's looking for them every day and who is being their champion. And then they're finishing out that academic year with 27 absentees. And we gained 2, which is understandable. Life happens, but we've broken a pattern. Then that student's also better positioned to go into the next year with better patterns and healthier habits and an excitement for learning. So that has been another huge win. And communities and schools also has phenomenal SEL outcomes for participants as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know why it's taken us so long in education to get this right. I mean, we've known, like, Maslow was talking, was in the 60s or 70s. I mean, talking about this stuff. I mean, we know that we've got to get that stuff right. We can't just say, students a failure because they're not doing the work. Like, we've got to dig in. You mentioned the book, What Happened to You? And if a student's dealing with trauma, whether it's from their past or ongoing trauma, or they're dealing with toxic levels of stress because of things that are happening in the home or the community, pretending like that doesn't exist, or pretending like that's not part of our responsibility in terms of the schools to address that so they can learn. It's almost like removing that barrier so that then the student can thrive. I mean, it seems crazy that it's taken us this long, but I am so thankful for the work that you're doing, because that's really a lot. It seems to me what you're telling me is what we're trying to do is remove as many barriers as possible to these students reaching their full potential, because all of them have such amazing potential and amazing gifts to give to the world, and none of them are really responsible for those barriers that stand in their way. So having caring adults to go into these buildings and having a formal structure to help remove those barriers seems like such a beautiful thing. And it makes me wonder, why don't we have an on track everywhere? Why don't we have an on track Myrtle Beach and Columbia and Charleston? Are there any plans to replicate this model in other areas, or has there been thought given to that?
Well, I want to touch on something you shared real quickly before I answer that question. In some ways, the formalizing the process, I think, is really what has made OnTrack unique in Greenville. But within Greenville, we know that there have been caring teachers,
Yes.
there have been caring adults in buildings that have been doing
Hmm.
different facets of this work since the beginning of time. The teachers that were quietly loading up a backpack to send food home, that were picking up a student, that were stopping by and checking in on a family. Like, the adults have been doing this work. And by formalizing it, my hope is that we can pull a little bit of weight off of their shoulders, because we know that they carry so much. And the quote unquote simple process of being an educator, of just educating, that is a far bigger load than so many careers, passions ask of anybody. And so to also then have the expectation that they're supposed to be these superheroes taking care of entire families, it's so unfair.
Yeah.
We really want all of our educators to feel that we are partners with them, that when they call their on-track facilitator and say, I'm really worried about this family, that they know that someone's gonna be checking in, that at the end of the night they can say, I noticed and I said something, and now we have systems in place to make sure that that family's okay. And if they're not okay, we're gonna figure out the partners that can help stabilize them and get them to a better place. But to your question of scaling our work, we really have a focus right now of deepen, expand, and share. So, deepen our work. We are not done in our 6 schools. So, we look at the partners at the table, we do see our gaps. And so, we are eager to figure out who else do we bring to the table? What new partners can fill some of the needs that are being unmet? Then expand. There are for our 6 schools, there are 10 feeder elementary schools. And so, we are each year starting to slowly step into the space of what does it look like to better partner with them, so we're creating that continuity, first through 12th grade, because we think that's really important. How can we walk with families through as much of the education process as possible? But then a big part is share. We have a small but mighty team, and we do great work, but we also know that it's a big state, and it's even a big county. But how are we sharing our lessons learned so that what we're doing can be replicated elsewhere? And so, for other communities that are listening in, I'd encourage you to look around. So, the community schools model, there's the community schools network. It goes by a lot of different names, but you may be surprised at communities that are very close to you geographically or that share a lot of similar characteristics to your community that are doing facets of this work. They may not call it on track work, but if you look into early warning systems, in some cases they do call it an on track process, community school models. So much great work is happening here in South Carolina and in communities across the country where I think we can all be learning lessons because for every challenge that we have encountered, when we look to other communities, what we're finding is that we've yet to have a unique challenge. It may
Mhm.
be packaged a little differently because every community is a little different, but the core challenges, the core systems that we want to see strengthened and improved, or in some cases eradicated because the system is not serving anyone well. There are other communities doing this work. And so I think it's through that collaboration and creating networks that we're able to work more effectively to serve
Mhm.
our educators and our families and our staff and our students. And I don't think we can afford to try and figure it all out on our own.
Right. I want to go back to your point about the educators who've cared for, I come from a family of educators, and my dad tried to build a community school back in the 70s and brought in dentists and doctors and into the building so that the students who had trouble with access, had those services right there in the building. um and you know I think that's the problem, is that educators have had to put on so many hats on top of just educator. Here's the curriculum, here's what I'm supposed to be teaching, and now they're counselors, they're having to take on all of these other roles because there's so many needs that our young people have that aren't being met, and educators care so much about their kids. Then there's kind of like they feel this need to put on those extra hats. And the idea that, no, it's the whole community needs to come together to help these kids grow and develop, to provide these kids resources, and then pulling that weight and telling the head teacher, no, we'll take that hat off of your head, and then you can really just focus on the essential aspects of your job. I think that's a key part of what teachers need, is they need some of these. They're being told so many things that they're supposed to be, that that have been layers added onto the job without any additional compensation, any additional time allotted to them. And it's very, very stressful, I think, to try to keep up with that, and also to feel like all of that is your responsibility. So I think it's your point is well taken, and but it is, and there's a need for it to be systemic and formal, so that it's done sustainably and with integrity across the board. I want to ask you real quickly about, you've mentioned early warning systems a couple of times, and for our listeners who might not know what an early warning system is, can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. And this can look a little different in every community, but I can at least speak to what we have in ours. And so, Greenville County School District actually developed a proprietary system. There are pre made systems available. So, a lot of communities are looking towards developed tools, and some are still developing their own. Really needs to meet the needs of that individual school district or the
Mm.
specific school. What it is doing is connecting the internal data systems that are already existing within a school. Because so often, something we hear from educators, especially in other communities, where they say, I go to Backpack for this, I go to Power School for this, I've got 8 different systems. And so if I'm trying to figure out what's going on with student A, I'm combing all these different systems. Or these systems, by the time I'm getting some sort of a flag or alert, we already could have seen a trend. Like we already knew that something was going on. And oftentimes those systems are only situated to really look at a student level. It can be a lot harder to see a grade level or a school-wide trend. So our early warning system, the intervention connection system, and GC source are two systems that work together, and they are pulling in real-time data. So at the end of every day, an educator can pull up and look at their classroom. They can say, here are my students that are all green, here's all yellow, here's all red. They can also look at trends. So if they see that they really have a cluster of male students that are struggling, it could be a great opportunity to be bringing that to the OnTrack team and say, is there a trusted adult in the building, a male that might want to lead a small group around behavior, or really facilitate a conversation around what's going on? Or maybe there's a challenge with attendance. Can we create some sort of accountability structure? And so the ability to look at data on both a granular level and to look at trends is something that's really created a profound shift in how we discuss and use data. Sometimes data feels like um, an unpleasant word, but really data is just a lens through which we can see. It refines our understanding.
Sure.
And it gives us quantitative data, which is the start. We know that quantitative data is nothing without the story, without the qualitative. But it gives us a systematic way of understanding where all of our students are at in real time. And it gives us the ability to compare across years and see how is attendance comparing this year to this time last year, or how are academics doing. So especially when school-wide initiatives are put into place, it's a great way for schools to see, are we seeing improvement in this area of focus over time, and how does this compare to prior years?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you're tracking student data. Are you tracking also, is there any way you're tracking educator data in terms of like their attendance or their morale or their retention rates and that kind of thing?
Yes, and there's a lot of room for growth. So we do an educator survey, and so we walk that fine line of we are all surveyed
Hmm.
now,
Yeah.
and yet another survey to say, how do you feel appreciated? Sometimes just feels like, well, if you appreciate me, please don't make me do another survey. I finally have a break. I don't want to do this.
Right.
So we try to find that balance, but we used to do it twice a year. We're moving to a once a year model, just trying to respect how full everyone's plate is. But looking at some of those core SEL components, belonging, do you have someone you can lean on? How do you see your relationship with your students, with other adults in the building? We're looking through that to see, are there trends that can inform our work, public education partners, that can inform our staff level strategies. So we are trying to make data informed decisions. And then our evaluators are also doing qualitative interviews with school leadership, on-track facilitators, different key roles within the building to determine, are there some qualitative trends, what we're seeing around some of these SEL components, and are these things that are actionable? Because sometimes it's just really small changes can have a profound effect. But if we don't identify what that small change is, then we're never going to remove something that feels like a boulder. And really, it's a pebble. It's something that
Yeah.
we can figure out. We just need to identify it. So, but some areas where we would love to grow in is around that retention piece and that recruitment piece. So we're
Yeah.
having a lot of internal conversations around how do we create environments where we're bringing in really phenomenal, excited teachers, and once they're here, how do we ensure that they are poured into and appreciated and cared for in a way that's going to make it sustainable for them to continue thriving in their role? Because we know that so often when educators are leaving, education, it's not because they don't care, but often they care so much, and their needs have gone unmet
Yeah.
in the process. And so, where do we take that ownership, and where do we take accountability for ensuring that those adults are feeling seen and heard and recognized?
That's such an important point. I mean, people think about quitting and they think, well, it's just, I found something else I want to do. And I think when with educators, the issue is exactly what you're saying. They care so much, and they're just it's just they're depleted. A lot of them are depleted because they have whether vicarious trauma or they're just they care so much that they're getting in the building at 6:30 in the morning. They stay till 5 or 6. They go home, they're exhausted, but they still have calls to make and plans, and a game they want to go to because one of their students is playing in a game, but so then they want to show up for them, giving up their weekends, and then trying to make that happen throughout the year. It's a lot, and so I think that's an excellent point. I want to ask you, Taylor, now that you've been doing this work for a while, if you could write a sort of a short summary of one thing that you think, or maybe a couple of things that we could do in terms of education policy to improve the lives of young people, particularly in schools that are where there's high levels of poverty and high levels of uh, being under resourced. Like, what would you say would be some of the top things that you think we need to change systemically to improve the lives of the educators and students in those buildings?
I think on a systemic level, looking at pay is huge because pay matters. People deserve to be compensated for the work that they're doing. We need to recognize, what does it look like for the work that is done outside of traditional work hours? How do we put those systems in place? I also think that the community schools work is really important. So there are some states that have actually codified that. And if a school has over a certain percent of students in poverty, they are required to adopt some type of community schools model. So they're being challenged, and there's funding associated with that on a state level to support that work, to have that full-time communities and school site coordinator, or however they want to label that, but to have that full-time support person in the building, and to be bringing in different pipeline services to meet the needs of students. And so I believe Maryland is an example that by 2025, right now I think the work began at, if you were 80% students in poverty or higher, you had to adopt some sort of model. By 2025, it's going to be 55% of students in poverty or higher. So really taking that forward look at, if we want to transform communities, we have to start early. We have to start seeing students as children. And that's something I think we so often leave out of the conversation when we're talking about students, is that they are children that are situated within families, that are situated within communities. And if we care about the well-being of our community, then we need to figure out, how do we support that child? And it can't all be on the schools. But really, bringing partners into the schools is a way of trying to pull weight off. We're trying to take that invisible backpack off of the adults in the building and say, we understand it's not your job to do it all. Please help partners come in and support this work.
Yeah.
And on a federal level, the Full Service Community Schools Grant through the Department of Education has been a true gift to our work. We are in just started year 3, but that funding is really critical. And so to ensure funding like that for the Department of Education is not only sustained, but is increased, because we know that there are other communities that are eager to start this work, and to have the support from a federal grant of that size is a huge help in that process.
Yeah. If folks want to learn more about OnTrack and connect with you, Taylor, how do they do that?
We are all over social media, so please find us, OnTrack Greenville. Also, our website, ontrackgreenville.org. Or if you want to go through United Way of Greenville County as our backbone, they are doing phenomenal work. So not only are they looking at the same geographic area that we're looking at, they're looking at the entire county. So if you visit United Way of Greenville County, you can get a snapshot of the different areas of focus around different work that is being done in partnership with our schools and in other areas, and that'll also link you to us. And once again, I'm Taylor Dockter. I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. Please reach out. I welcome an opportunity to talk about our work more, and also to learn from other communities, because we know that there are so many valuable lessons to be shared and learned from.
Yeah, and I understand you're in Asheville working with some other folks working in community schools, and one of my favorite parts of the country. I hope you're enjoying that time there, and it sounds like a great thing to be a part of.
It has been a phenomenal opportunity we've got 50 communities, and there are over 150 communities across the United States that are doing work very similar to OnTrack's work. And it's going to look a little different, but we are all in this together, and we're really united around transforming communities. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think collecting that data and then comparing it and figuring out what works and what doesn't allows you to move the work and evolve the work faster and make it even more effective. But I want to just take a minute to thank you, Taylor, and thanks EJ and everybody at OnTrack for the work that you're doing. It's important work. It's valuable work, and helping young people reach their potential. It takes so many people being on board with that, and addressing the needs that they have. And I think it's such noble work. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about OnTrack Greenville, and really just enjoyed this opportunity. So thank you.
All right, if you'll hang out backstage, I'm going to close out, and I'll be right back.
Sounds great.
All right, everybody. That was Taylor Dockter from OnTrack Greenville. Encourage you to connect with them if you want to learn more about what they're doing. Also encourage you to connect with us at the scea.org/connect. And if you are interested in joining the SCEA, you can see along the bottom, you just head on over to jointhescea.org or text the word join to 48744. Really what it's about is an invitation to you to be a part of a movement that's designed to deliver the kind of schools that our educators deserve. Our educators are doing noble work, they're doing important work. And unfortunately, they're not being paid well enough. Their working conditions have been increasingly it's increasingly exploiting them, not allowing them enough time with their families and friends, overworking and stressing them out to the point where they're burned out and leaving the profession, as evidenced by the SCEA supply and demand report that was released today, with a record number of educator departures and a record number of vacant classrooms. So along those lines, we are going to have Dr. Jennifer Garrett from SCEA, who authored the report. She's going to be on our live stream on Monday, November 21st, from 7 to 8 o'clock. So make sure you put that on your calendars. If you have questions or comments, you can ask her. We will go into that report in depth and really take a look at the numbers and talk about what those numbers mean. I want to wish everybody a great end to your week. As always, you can check out all of these live streams are put on the Cool website at cool.us. That's www.cewl.us. If you are in a school, or if you're an administrator or teacher and you need some professional learning, we offer free professional learning resources. You can go to that website, fill out the form. It's free and there's no obligation, and we will connect with you and try to bring you some of the professional learning resources that the SCEA and Cool provides to our public schools here in South Carolina at absolutely no cost. We would just want to support your learning and support your the educators in your building. We also want to remind you that not only can classroom teachers be a member of the SCEA, but bus drivers, custodial workers, cafeteria workers, anybody who's a professional working in that school building, administrators, can be a part of our union. And that is exactly what we are. We are a union. When you join us, you're joining your local association, the SCEA, which is our state association, and the NEA, which is the largest labor union in the United States with 3.2 million members. And as a result of having over 3 million members, there are a lot of benefits and discounts that we have that make your dues dollars well worth the investment, because that's what it is. When you pay dues, you get what you pay for. And it's an investment in your profession and an investment for yourself to be protected and to get the benefits of being a part of a collective group like the NEA, the SCEA, and your local association. So that's all we have for tonight. I want to thank again Taylor Dockter and OnTrack. Also give shout out to EJ Anderson, to TJ Rumler, and everybody working up in that Greenville area. You're doing amazing work. You deserve so much applause and credit. And I'm so glad to give you this platform tonight to share the great work you're doing. To everybody else, have a great evening and a great weekend. And we'll see you on Monday with Dr. Jennifer Garrett.